Just got through telling a wrestling experience from the mission field, and I'll tell you a few miscellaneous experiences now. This one I'll title Ted the Wrestler Faces the Sievert Brothers. And when we moved into the ward that we lived in for 31 years, Granite View Ward, this would have been about 1970. Would have been about 1980, 81. We moved in, and there were two brothers there that were wrestlers. Tony and John Sieverts, knew them quite well, knew the Sieverts family quite well. And Tony had just gotten through winning his second place in the state tournament championship. He was a terrific wrestler, and his brother, John, was wrestling collegiately up at Utah State University. They were, I outweighed them about 8 or 10 pounds, but I hadn't, they came to me when we were going with a youth group, the young men and the young women, to the YMCA to stay overnight, and they said, we want to wrestle you. And I said, I haven't even thought of a wrestling move in 6 years. And they said, well, we're going to wrestle you anyway. And so I said, all right. So when we got to the YMCA, they were just very, very anxious to get me on the mat, and because they were both very, very tough. And so Tony says, I get him first. And I thought, oh boy. And he was, I outweighed him about 10 pounds. I still had a little fire, and but I hadn't thought of any wrestling for a long time. And so Tony and I were wrestling around there, and he was quite strong. He was pretty powerful. But I was pretty strong, I was pretty powerful too, and I finally took him down and did a couple of things, and after about a minute and a half I pinned him, and he was really shocked. And so so I rested for about a minute and a half, and John, who was a little better wrestler, and he was wrestling at the collegiate level, which is a whole different ball game, we wrestled, and I stayed with him for about a minute and a half, and then I ran out of gas. I just wasn't in any kind of shape to be doing what I was doing. After about a minute and a half, he pinned me, and so that was the deal with the Sieverts brothers. Although Tony never could quite forget that. So about a year later, up at Flaming Gorge, he came up in the afternoon. I remember it was kind of a hot afternoon, and we were in our swimming suits and had on our thongs or bare feet, I forget. And he came up, and he took his finger and he said, "What's that?" And he pointed here, and as I looked down, he shot for my legs to take me down. He was going to throw me in the lake, and so he shot for me, but I recovered pretty quick, just as quick as I could see what he was trying to do. We were wrestling around there in the sagebrush. All I was trying to do was keep from getting thrown in the lake. I should have just, if I'd have had more energy right then, I'd have picked him up and thrown him in the lake. But we wrestled around there in the sagebrush for about another minute and a half or two, until he finally realized he wasn't going to do anything with me, and that was that. So that's about the end of the wrestling experiences. Wrestling was something, if I had to do over again, I probably wouldn't do it over again. I'd probably spend all my time playing tennis in high school. Okay, this, I thought I ought to throw in at least a few, not very many, but a few of my speeding ticket experiences. All of my sons know that their penchant for speed is hereditary. They get it from their father, and I think I got it from Grandpa Nelson. So it's hereditary. It's in the genes. It comes down from, it's a patriarchal speeding line. This is the story of the multiple offenses of the midnight motorcyclist. This would have been about 1982, 1983, and I had borrowed Uncle Scott's motorcycle so that I could get my motorcycle license, and I had driven it down to a play practice. The stake was putting on the production The Music Man, and we were having a play practice at Hillcrest High School, and the play practice lasted fairly late. But after it was over, I decided I'd just take the motorcycle out and kind of zip it up a little bit, see what it would do. So went down to 10th East, a real quiet back street, and got on the throttle, and pretty soon I was up to 65, and before I knew it, there was a red light right in my rear view mirror, and I thought, oh man. So I pulled over, and the officer came up and he said, going pretty fast, aren't you? He says, I've got you going for 65 and a 25. And I said, yeah, they sure do scoot, don't they? And he said, well, let me see your driver's license. And I went, oh, I don't have it with me. I just came to a play practice and I forgot to bring my license. He said, well, let's see your registration. I said, okay. I said, well, I just borrowed this motorcycle from my brother, and let me see if I can find it. So I looked around in the toolbox and a couple little compartments and couldn't find the registration. I says, oh my gosh, I can't find the registration, officer. And he says, by the way, did you know your tail light's out? And I said, well, like I say, I borrowed this bike from my brother. I didn't know it was out. He says, well, what's your brother's name? I said, Scott R. Nelson. He said, where does he live? And I said, oh, he lives about 88 South and 3rd East. He says, just a minute. So he went back in his patrol car, and I'm adding up 65 and a 25, no tail light, no registration, no license, and I'm thinking this is going to cost me about $200 and maybe jail, and maybe my insurance company's going to cancel me. Anyway, he comes back and he says, yep, that's where your brother lives, all right. He says, where do you live, sir? And I said, I live about 25th East and 97th South. And he said, well, you better be kind of careful going home. And I said, oh, thank you, officer, very much. I'll title this next one, The Wyoming Highway Patrol Wishes Ted a Merry Christmas. One time I was fishing by myself, and I was fishing up, started off, this was about, I think, a 2-day trip just overnight, and I fished up on the Henry's Fork in Idaho, and then I decided I'd go over across just below Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So I drove across there, and I usually would drive a little fast, as everybody knows, and so I, as I was coming past Jackson Hole, I didn't actually go into the city, but I decided to cut down there and go across the south, and just after I started across the junction there, I wasn't paying any attention, but coming the other way, on went the red and blue lights, and I looked, and it was me. So I immediately pulled right over, and before long, the highway patrolman from Wyoming had pulled around, and he got up behind me, and he was kind of brash. He was polite, but he was brash. He said, "Going kind of fast, weren't you?" And I said, "Yeah, I guess I was. I just wasn't paying attention." He said, "Well, the last time I checked in Teton County, there wasn't any place you could go 74 miles an hour. There's a 55 mile an hour speed limit everywhere. You'll have to go clear to I-80 way to the south before you could ever go as fast as you were going." I thought, oh man, I am dead. "I'll see your license and registration." "Here they are, sir." Hand them to him. And he came back a few minutes later. Thought, "Oh, this is going to cost me about 120 or 50. This would have been about, I'm going to say 1998, maybe 2000. He came back and he said, "Mr. Nelson, Christmas is going to come early to you this year." It was September. "Christmas is going to come early to you this year." And I thought, oh, good. He says, "You were going a little fast, but I appreciated you pulling over early like you did." And he said, "You've got to slow down." And I said, "Oh, I will, officer. Thank you very much." And the last thing he said was, "Merry Christmas." Next little part, this next little story I'll just refer to as Scot-Free Ted. I've had a number of speeding tickets. I've never tried to count, and I don't think I'll try to count now, but I've had a number of speeding tickets over the years. But about 2000 or 2001, I guess, and it was the last time I got pulled over for speeding, would have been by the Wyoming Highway Patrolman that I just barely mentioned. But in about a 10-month period, I got pulled over 5 times for speeding, and I got 2 warning tickets and 3 watch outs, and that was it. Not an actual ticket that cost me any money. But on that last one from Wyoming, I said to myself, wow, I've just got to slow down. I can't speed anymore. And so I have slowed down. It's been really interesting. I slow down, they don't pull me over. I guess we've got a deal. But it's always irritated Mother quite a little bit that, and she's expressed this numerous times, that whenever she gets pulled over, which is only very occasionally, she always gets a legitimate have to pay the fine, ticket come off your insurance. And it's always irked her just a little bit that somehow, and it's not that I've sweet talked, I'm just polite and have been lucky, I guess, on the speeding tickets. So those are just a few of many speeding ticket experiences.